I'm Adrienne Enns, and I welcome you to the Intention Sessions podcast. I want to inspire our most intentional living. In each episode, we'll talk to remarkable individuals who will share their authentic journeys and their insights with us. They're going to remind us that life's complexities can be our greatest teachers, and that intentional living can be expressed in an infinite number of ways. I hope you find some inspiration for your most intentional life right here. Today on the podcast, I am very thrilled to have Cristina Tahoces join us. Cristina is a holistic nutritionist and the owner of Thrive Nutrition Practice. This is a global online wellness business focused on building physical and mental health resilience to stress. A former corporate banker, Cristina turned to nutrition to help herself heal from acute allergies, postnatal depletion, and burnout. Over the years, she's helped clients boost energy levels and immunity. They've improved sleep and anxiety and even reversed hypertension and insulin resistance, all through her in-depth knowledge about how to use food therapeutically to align mind and body. Cristina holds an MBA from the Schulich School of Business and graduated with first-class honors from the Edison Institute of Nutrition in Toronto, where she earned a diploma in holistic nutrition. She also shared her nutritional strategy on the TedX stage as part of TED Women's Global Conference. I am so thrilled to have her join us and share this amazing message with us today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here too.
As I was just saying off air, and we'll see where things go, but I'm really interested for you to share with listeners, first of all, about your journey. So, how does somebody make that? And I'm going to describe it as a dramatic shift because in my personal experience, it is from the corporate environment to the work that you're doing today. And the other thing that didn't get said there, that amazing TEDx speech that we're going to link to in the show notes is all about the importance of sleep, love, and poop. And I don't think I've ever used the poop word on this podcast. It maybe never will again. I'm not sure. That's new. I'm like, I feel everything. like a 8-year-old boy being like, oh my God. But,
exactly.
What I loved about that speech and what I want to share with listeners is sometimes this is all stuff, sleeping, loving, pooping, that we do every day. Do you know what I mean? That we just pause. Yeah. We're like, okay, I got to do this. This is part of what I do. But are we doing it in a mindful, intentional way? And could we be using all of the resources within us and around us to optimize our health and really align with our highest well-being? This is what I really want to talk to you about. Are you in?
I'm so in.
Let's do it. So let's start with that transition. So you were in corporate banking. It says in your bio that there was burnout. So I'm not sure if that was, the tipping point for you. Do you want to tell us what happened?
Okay. So interestingly, it wasn't the tipping point, but it was part of the journey there. I graduated from my MBA in 99 and I left Canada at that point. I moved to Luxembourg and I started a career in banking. And, it was a career that I had been curating really from kind of the time of my undergrad. And so, for me to move into a career in loan syndications, which was what I was doing at the time, was just, it was a dream come true. For me, it was fantastic. I was living the dream. I was, doing work that I enjoyed. I felt like I was making a difference. Plus I got to stay and travel and stay in beautiful hotels and, eat beautiful food and wine. And it was sort of like what I felt like, the high high flying life. And I enjoyed practically every minute of it. Obviously, there's not, there's not a perfect day every day in this scenario, but it was definitely a career that I enjoyed. But it was definitely high stress, right? It was also a career where I had to travel a lot. So, I talk about like airplane food being a food group for me for many years.
Yes.
It was like,
what do we think about that food group?
Yeah. Exactly. And, I had to present a lot. I had to justify my positions a lot. It was a lot of living outside of myself, if that makes sense to you.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that just takes a lot out of you. Even if you're enjoying it, it does just take a lot of bodily resources from you. And from Luxembourg, I moved to London I met my husband in Luxembourg, and we moved to London together. We were both in banking. And, on a rainy day in London, he said, you know what, there's this job going in Hong Kong, and I'm just wondering if I should go for it. And I said, why not? Let's just do it. It was like a rainy, horrible, drab day in London. And I thought, maybe it's just time for the tropics, right? So, so we moved to Hong Kong, and I was like thinking we'd get like weekends in Phuket and then, on the beach in the Philippines. But anyway, no such thing. Never worked harder in my life. And we both moved with our respective companies at that point. And as I said, it was just like never worked harder, 14, 15, 16-hour days. It was the time when, with a transition to kind of like the smartphone and always being on, right? Like this feeling of like you are always on. And, during that time, I got pregnant with my first child, and the maternity leave in Hong Kong was 10 weeks. And I had a really traumatic birth.
Okay.
My pregnancy was great, but I had a really traumatic birth, and it took me a really long time to recover. So by the time those 10 weeks were up, I was in just like no way, shape, or form ready to return to the workplace. And I decided to take some time off. And I guess it was like that stopping and that realization that actually I had not been paying attention to those warning signs that my body was giving me on almost a daily basis by that point,
Could you describe for us what some of those warning signs might have been?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know if you've read the book by Dr. Emily Nagoski called Burnout.
No.
I really recommend it to you, your listeners. As soon as I read her definition of burnout, it really kind of just struck a chord in me because, she talks about burnout as like stress getting stuck in your body and not being able to be released, right?
Yes.
So if you can just kind of picture an image where you're just on a treadmill, you're going at like 1,000,000 miles an hour and you can't get off, right?
I can imagine it very well.
Exactly, right? And you're just stuck in this like cyclical, just never ending looping cycle of stress, right?
Yes.
This really struck a chord with me because this is where I was at. I was on that treadmill, right? Like constantly on, never being able to get off. And for me, if I were to do a body scan of where stress gets stuck in my body, it gets stuck in my throat and in my stomach, like in my gut.
Mm-hmm.
I really feel it there in both of these places. And so stress, like whenever I had to like run to catch that plane, review my notes to go and do a presentation, get on the phone and like talk to the investors, to the corporate, to sell the loan, to do this, to do that, and then justify to my boss why I wanted to leave at 8:30 p.m.,
Yes.
And all of that kind of stuff, like all of those little mini stressors that you just respond to on a daily basis. All of those stressors were getting stuck in my body. And to your point, when I ate, I would bloat. I would feel nauseous sometimes. I would then have these like sort of irregular bowel movements where I would kind of go from like being constipated to then just having, what I call like explosive poops. There goes that word again. We're using it again.
I love it.
Especially like when I had my period,
Yeah.
and, to my throat, I was diagnosed with underactive thyroid at one point, like not too bad, but just kind of just a thyroid that wasn't working optimally, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you're familiar with hypothyroidism, that takes a toll on like energy levels, on your metabolism. You feel cold. You can experience hair loss, and I was experiencing all of these symptoms. And I think when you kind of like when they're a little bit erratic, or maybe if things don't happen every day, you don't think it's a pattern. You don't think it's chronic, but it is. It's not normal, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not normal to bloat when you eat. It's not normal to experience constipation and then have explosive poops when you're on your period. It's not normal to have painful periods or heavy periods or to have an underactive thyroid. None of these things it's not normal to feel cold in your extremities or to experience hair loss. None of these things are normal, but because over time, stress starts to get stuck in the body in different ways, and it starts to manifest itself in different ways. When I was 30, maybe I only had one of those symptoms, right? By the
Mm-hmm.
time I was 35, I was experiencing a few more. And by the time I was pregnant and I had my child, and that took my whole world to a different level of stress and depletion, because making a baby from scratch it's amazing. I think the biggest tragedy is that women are able to multitask the creation of life, because you're just completely unaware of like what kind of a miracle is happening within, like in terms of
I
like,
totally agree.
right, like
Yes.
you like all of those nutrients and all of those building blocks that go into creating a human life come from one woman. Like, it's insane if you
Yeah.
really
And
think
this
about it.
wise body knows what to do, and all
Exactly.
in good time. And yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. So to your original question, was it work? It wasn't. Like it was me being in a state of chronic stress all the time,
Mm-hmm.
you know, many, many years of, when I was a student, many, many years of putting that pressure of perfectionism and having to be at the top of my game, at the top of my class. And following on from that, many years of being in a high stress, high demanding, no mistakes environment, where, I was just responding to stress all the time and not understanding the toll it was taking on my body and how many little fires I was having to put out progressively over the years. And then pregnancy being really the straw that broke the camel's back,
Mm-hmm.
and the stress that followed on my body, on my mental health, and just me kind of realizing that if I went back to work at that point, I was not going to make it. Like, I was just not going to make it.
Yeah. So I hear you saying like so much, there's so many things here, but just to pull out a few threads. You've used the word depletion a lot, which I really want to extract for myself. Also for listeners, you're bringing up the issue that we normalize so much that is very, very unhealthy. And what I also hear you saying, which maybe it's just because it was true for me, but when I heard the warning signs, I just wanted to avoid them. It's like, I don't have time for this. I don't want to look at it. I mean, I chose to numb it out with alcohol, which was obviously not a good answer, but there's that avoidance piece. But the other thing that I just want to touch on before we dive into those 3 key areas in your TED Talk is that I'm going to ask the question. I'm wondering what you think is it's not that the messages we necessarily need to leave the corporate world, or we need to do this, or we need to do that. It's that we need to listen to our bodies, nourish our bodies, replenish our bodies, be mindful of our stress, and navigate from that place. Would you agree, or do you have a different viewpoint on that?
I totally agree with that. 100%.
Because I just want to always make it clear to listeners, because you're not the first person on here who's made the shift. I've also personally made the shift, but when I hear you talking too, like I also loved my time in the corporate world until I didn't, And for somebody who thrives in that environment, and I know that you coach a lot of executives, it's not that environment is negative or bad. It's just high stress. So we have to meet it.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I wish I had known back then what I know now about how to be resilient in the face of stress, both physically and mentally, because I don't know, maybe my journey could have been different. I don't regret what's happened at all, because I really feel like now I'm in a vocation that I believe in 100%, and I love the difference that I'm making in my life and my family's life and the life of my clients and those people I service. But I also work a lot with women in the corporate world who are burning out. And there are a lot of women today who have 2 choices available to them, burnout or bow out. And I don't think that neither of those options are fact. They shouldn't be our fate.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's your book title, by the way.
Our fate. Yeah.
That's going to plant that in here for future reference.
Yeah, and I felt like, the crossroads I got to was like, okay, I'm burnt out and I have to bow out at this point, because if not, like things are going to go really bad. Like, at that point I was like picturing my marriage going down the tube. Yeah. Like, do you know what? Like my life just going down the tube, right? And I think that a lot of women and COVID particularly has surfaced this reality for a lot of women, this burnout versus bow out. Like, what do I choose at this point? Because I can't go on like this. Right. Yeah. And so what I try to help people do through nutritional therapy is understand, okay, this is your reality. This is what we can't change, right? There are certain things that we cannot change. Not everyone has the luxury of leaving their job. Not everyone has the luxury of leaving their relationships. Not at this moment in time, right? Like these are not decisions that happen from one day to the next, right?
You're so right.
So what can we do today? What do we control today that can make an impact on how resilient we are in the face of the stressors that we cannot change?
I think it's so great. And then the idea that is coming up for me that I also had to learn was connecting to my body as an ally, you know? So,
Mm.
when I was feeling pain or stress or discomfort, instead of being like, oh, just be quiet, I need to numb this out, or this is just the way it is,
Yeah.
normalizing it, being like my body is part of me. Like it's actually working on
Yeah.
my behalf. And if I listen to
That's
it and
right.
nourish it and take care of it, we can work together. And I heard this great metaphor years ago that I think of all the time. And he was describing, if you had all these tools in the back of a pickup truck and you were driving down a dirty country road, they're all your tools are bouncing around and they're unorganized. It's just a
Mm.
complete mess. But you could put those tools, in shelves and drawers and have them very, very organized. So, using all your tools, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, food, sleep, poop, using all of these tools in a way that's constructive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And in a way that's mindful,
Yes.
in a way where you are present and connected to the choices that you are making, because that's where the magic and the science come together, right?
Yes.
That's where neuroplasticity meets behavioral change and feeds into love-led motivation and joy,
Yeah.
you know?
And a million simple choices, right? Like simple,
Mm-hmm.
consistent choices.
Absolutely. And I think that, as human beings, we're all looking for like that magic pill or that newest thing that is going to take us to where we want to go, right?
Yes.
Like what's that? What am I missing? I hear that a lot
Same.
in
All the
consultations,
time.
right? Like what am I missing? And I feel like the pressure to answer that question with like something the world has never heard before.
No, five
You
simple
know?
steps.
It's like it's massive, right? And sometimes it's really like finding those moments in your day, in your everyday life, and it's finding the magic in those things that you do on a daily basis that really makes the difference, you
I
know?
couldn't agree more.
Yeah, like it doesn't have to be anything that you don't already do. I mean, one of the things that I teach in my group coaching classes is, you know, the whole difference between deficit-led nutrition and love-led nourishment. And deficit-led nutrition is basically what I think most of us have been doing for the majority of our lifetime, especially if you're born in the 70s like I was.
Me too.
Like,
Yep.
right? So if you want to accomplish a goal like weight loss, so you just start taking things away, right? You take away fat, you take away calories, you take away this, you take away that, right? And you end up just in this situation where you're practicing deficit led nutrition. Like you're dieting, right? That's the definition of dieting. You're reducing, you're taking away, right? And as I said in my TEDx talk, you know, I just something just came over me one day and I'm like, every time I take something away, when I listen to myself, when I listen to my inner voice, what I'm really saying is, you're not worthy of this. You don't deserve it. You don't deserve joy in your life. You don't deserve food that tastes good, food that, you don't deserve to eat,
Yeah.
basically, right? And and making that transition to love-led nourishment, one of the things that's just really simple and that you do every day is when you make your meal, dinner, for example. Everyone's tired by the time they get to make dinner. Nobody wants to make dinner. I don't want to make dinner after a whole day's work, right?
Right.
Like who wants to, right? But that action of like taking the food out of the fridge, choosing what you want to feed yourself, what do you want to nourish yourself with, and saying to yourself, well done, Christina. You're doing something that's really good for you right now. You're loving yourself by choosing this chicken, by choosing these vegetables. This is something that's really hard to do for you right now, and you're doing it. Good on you.
It's so
And then just
simple.
being mindful.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's so simple, and it starts there.
And the one thing I want to, add in there, is because as I listen to you, it absolutely makes complete sense. And then when I relate it to my personal experience, like I did have to take something out, I had to take alcohol out of my life. So that was to me not optional, like that's not something I can dabble with. So there was, taking that out. And, people can feel at a deficit when something has to be removed. But the wisest thing I learned, and I had to learn it over time, to your point about nourishment, is, when I say no to that, I'm saying yes to a lot of other things, So
That's
how
right.
can I nourish myself, whether it's food, people, activities, in a nourishing way to shift my attention to something that's really, really good for me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, so I years ago, I had a bad breakup,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And I was living in Luxembourg at the time. And, my parents, obviously learned about this breakup, and I was really cut up. And my dad, he said to me, my dad, he's just full of these little gems. He said to me, I was watching Dr. Phil on Oprah today.
I love it.
I was watching Oprah the other day, and Dr. Phil was on, and he said, don't forget, replace.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, because if there's a void,
You have to fill
we're
it.
going to kind of, well, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but like it's easy to go to our patterns, right? Like I know what I used to fill that void, but it wasn't
100%.
working. So I need to very mindfully, consciously choose new things. And sometimes that's an experiment too, right? Like, oh, I think this might nourish me, but it actually doesn't. So I'm going to have to shift to something else.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's the same concept in nutrition. You're right. There are things that we have to take out of our diet. If you're an emotional eater, for example, and you binge on sugar, and that sugar is causing you to become pre-diabetic, 100% we're going to have to do something about taking that sugar out.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're not replacing and if we're not filling that void with something truly meaningful, and that definition of meaningful is different for everybody, right? But if we're not filling that void, then it's going to be really difficult for that person to shift their behaviors because, what's the incentive? What's in it for them?
Exactly. So let's shift to your TED Talk because I mean everybody can watch it. We're going to share the link, but I really want to make time for each of these three things because they are so important. And like I said, I think we take them for granted to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
And like we can go in the order, you can take it in whatever order you want, but lead us through it.
Okay. Well, let's start with sleep then.
Okay, let's start with sleep.
let's start at the very beginning. So when I was looking at kind of building out my practice and understanding really, what am I about as a nutritionist, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
why would anybody come to me, right? As opposed to anyone else, right? Because there are just so many wonderful healers and nutritionists and wellness practitioners out there. Why me? I had a long, hard think about what worked for me in my journey, and really just kind of what the essence of what I thought nutrition was about, right? What I thought nourishment was about, and what I was missing throughout my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's the difference of me and my nourishment habits now versus me as a banker, me as a student, me in my previous kind of, incarnations.
Yeah.
And it really was that, me as kind of a recovered, person, as somebody who was thriving in health. The one thing that I was doing differently was that I was eating with purpose, that I wasn't eating I wasn't eating mindlessly or eating according to, what I was told I should eat by commercials,
Yes.
right? So like people eat breakfast cereal because that's what they grow up seeing on a commercial.
Yeah.
For example, I was really eating with purpose. I was being clear about what my goals were for the day, and I was eating to meet those goals. In terms of what the big headlines were, in terms of what I needed to do to eat with purpose, because, it's not enough to know what you have to do. You have to be able to do it. You have to be able to action your plan.
Yes.
Because everybody knows they have to eat vegetables,
Mm-hmm.
right? The problem is not in knowing, the problem is in doing.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, in terms of the big things that I am doing and how I'm eating, I am eating with the purpose to sleep. I'm eating with the purpose to love myself better and to show myself kindness. So I'm choosing food that shows my body and my mind love and kindness and respect. And I am eating with the purpose to poop on a daily basis, to detoxify my body and let go of the crap I don't need. That's what I'm doing to stay healthy and to stay vibrant, so that health and that vibrancy can help me reach my goals.
Amazing.
And yeah, and that's the idea that I pitched to TEDx, and that's how I ended up doing a talk on sleep, love, poop.
So starting with sleep, like how can
Mm-hmm.
we like sleep more intentionally? Or if we have trouble
Mm-hmm.
sleeping, or we don't feel like we have enough time to sleep, or fitful sleeping, like what are some
Mm-hmm.
simple ways to start to improve that? And what is the benefit of sleep?
Oh my goodness. Lots to
I know, I'm
unpack
sorry.
there.
Like that was just like two giant questions, but I
No
have to
worries.
ask them as they come up because otherwise I forget and move on to the next thing.
For sure. Okay. Help me stay on
Okay.
track. So what are the benefits of
Yes.
sleep? There are just so many benefits to sleep. It's when we regenerate. It's when our body and brain detoxifies. Our brain actually shrinks while we sleep. Did you know that?
No.
It is crazy. Our brain shrinks, and then we have this like fluid that goes around swishing and sweeping up all of the debris.
So cool.
It is. Our body's amazing.
It really is.
And so, our hormones regulate while we sleep. So we produce certain hormones that help us gain weight, lose weight, while we sleep. But if we don't sleep enough, then, that's a prompt to kind of gain weight. We are so productive when we sleep, and we see it as an unproductive time. We don't value sleep because we see it as unproductive time, but it is actually when our body regenerates, detoxifies, and helps us stay fit and healthy. So it's crucial. It's crucial, especially if you are a person in a high stress environment. And unfortunately, it's those people that sleep the least.
And is there like an optimal amount of time to sleep, or does it vary per person?
It does vary per person, but I would say 7 to 8 hours is, pushing more towards 8 is the optimal time of sleep. And of course, there are always going to be exceptions to that rule,
Of course.
but that's sort of the time that we're looking at, 7 to 8 hours.
And then, sorry, go ahead.
No, I remembered your first question, which
Okay, I was
now I'm
going to lead
answering.
you back into that. So we're
Thank
very
you.
aligned.
So one of the things that I like to bring awareness to is that whilst sleep hygiene is extremely important, I often find that when people come to me and they are not able to sleep well, they've already tried the sleep hygiene, right? They're already sleeping without, phones next to them. They're already dimming lights by a certain time. They've got a bit of a sleep routine in place, and that's helped, but they're still experiencing issues. And one of the things that doesn't get talked a lot about is the role of nutrition in sleep.
Okay.
So, for example, if your diet is high in sugar or high in carbohydrates, and you experience a lot of blood sugar highs, excuse me, if you experience a lot of blood sugar highs and lows during the day, that has an impact on your ability to get to sleep and your ability to stay asleep. If you're a person who, for example, has toast and coffee for breakfast, and then maybe like a sandwich on the go, and you're operating in a high stress environment, and by the way, you don't need to be in a corporate setting to be in a high stress environment.
No, exactly.
One of the most burnt out kind of demographics are stay at home moms. Right. So just to make that clear. So if you're kind of having your child's, scraps for breakfast and lunch, and you're not nourishing your body during the course of the day, which is when our body reacts to stress, if you're not feeding your body some protein in order to make those neurotransmitters that help us with mood regulation, if you're not eating vitamin C rich foods in order to help your adrenal glands produce cortisol and flush then that cortisol out of your body, again, you are not going to be able to go to sleep and stay asleep, because you're going to be ruminating. Your body is not going to be able to switch itself off. You're not giving your body the tools and the nutrients it needs to build your stress hormones, to flush that cortisol out of your body and down regulate. Okay, I've got a lot of clients who are like, I want to meditate, I try to meditate, I can't. Right?
Yes, I hear that a lot.
Yeah, and that's because generally it's because their nutrition, they're not feeding themselves in the right way to get their body and their mind to cooperate with them, right? To nourish them the right way to address and be resilient to their stressors.
Yeah, and
so they're ruminating.
Yes. Am I interrupting you?
No.
Okay.
But I'm just, so they're ruminating, they're getting stuck, right? Back to Nagoski's definition of burnout. They're getting stuck in stress because their body isn't able to flush it out and let go of it.
Yeah. And when I hear you saying all this, it makes me think also, we live in a society where we kind of addressed it earlier, where we want these fast fixes, we want things transactional. And so it's like when I talk to people about being intentional, this is like being intentional with your diet and your sleep. It's gradual. You need to start eating properly for to your point, for your body to regulate. So well, first of all, am I right there? But if I am, like, people need to remember that it's like not that it's slow necessarily, but it takes time, but it's worth it because then it's sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think, to your point, and this segues really nicely into the love pillar, the sustainability comes from love,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes, yes,
That's where the
yes.
sustainability comes from,
But tell
because
us about that. I'm saying yes, but for somebody who's like, how does that? I have no idea how that goes together. Enlighten us.
yeah. One of the things that I say in my TEDx talk is, no one needs any help to eat, right? No one comes to a nutritionist because they need help to eat. Everyone knows how to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what is it? What is it that you're missing in order to make sustainable, healthy choices in your life? Why do people fall off the wagon, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And for me, for a lot of my clients, and I think women perhaps are guilty of this in particular. We lead lives of self-sacrifice over self-love and self-worth.
100%.
Yeah?
I'm thinking we did this workshop back pre-COVID, and the theme was kindness. And when
Mm-hmm.
I suggested, to me, self-kindness, self-love, very interchangeable. And, when we started talking about being kind to yourselves, they were like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a bit of anger that came out in the room, which was amazing because they were just like, oh, but I thought I was being, kind to all of these other people. But to your point about that original word depletion, they were kind, quote unquote, to this place of like they had absolutely nothing left, So
Yeah.
when we talked about being kind to yourself and loving yourself, we can have this misconception that it's selfish. But in my personal experience, when I started operating that way, now everybody around me is like, take all the time you need
Mm.
because you're so like you're happy and joyful and you have energy to give us when you come back.
Mm. Exactly. Exactly. One of the things that drove me crazy after I had my babies was, you know what you need, Christina? You need some me time. Why don't you go and get yourself a massage?
Mm-hmm.
Go take some me time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that it was well intended, of course, and maybe at that point it was all I could do, but I just kind of felt like that me time, it was just never enough. It never filled me up. I always felt like I was just taking a vacation from my life for an hour, and then I would go back and do the same old crap over
And
and
kind of
over
crash it
again.
in back in, right? Like the house is a mess,
Exactly.
everybody's miserable. You're like, okay, that didn't work. So
Exactly.
what is for somebody listening who's like, that's me. What is the love antidote to that?
Well, the love antidote to that, and what I realized, was that I needed to switch that ratio up. Like, I needed my life to be one that I loved and not one that I needed a vacation from. And a lot of that, at that point in my life as well, because of just, being a mom with young toddlers, and, just sort of the health transition that I needed to kind of go through at the time. And anyway, I'm kind of digressing, but what that meant for me was, really changing the relationship that I had with food, and not making it be a source of inner critic, of negative self-talk, of shame,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, why did I feel shame every time I went for the chocolate bar?
Yeah.
You know, and did it really matter that I was denying myself the chocolate when I really wasn't doing anything else to show myself love in how I nourished myself, right?
Yeah.
Like, what were those foods for me that were going to show me love, like real love, not like a substitute for love, right? But real love and kindness. And through my sort of scientific, I suppose, studies in nutrition and my understanding of how the body worked, I was able to identify what those foods were for me, and I started to prioritize those foods in my life. So I started to prioritize, having protein with every meal, having foods that were rich in antioxidants, making sure that I had plenty of leafy greens, and setting little targets for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Setting targets of like, today I introduced a new vegetable into my
Yeah.
fold, and by the end of the week, I had 2 new vegetables that I worked with, and that kind of thing, so that I was seeing progress and I was rewarding myself with love-filled food. And then if I wanted to have that chocolate, it wasn't so bad because I'd
Yeah.
done so much more for myself. I hadn't just taken away, I had added, I had nourished, I had filled my bucket. And so, okay, I had that chocolate and it didn't feel so bad. And it wasn't something that I was going to beat myself up about.
Yeah. And maybe you enjoyed it more and it's part of, a more balanced day, life, mindset, diet, all the things.
Yeah. I mean, what I realized over time was that I didn't want the candy bar anymore. My taste buds changed because, I wasn't having a high in sugar, high in carbohydrate diet. I was connecting to Mother Earth. I was connecting to the foods that came from Mother Earth, and my taste buds changed. My appreciation for the environment changed. I wanted to have better quality ingredients in my food, and in my meals, and I wanted to share those with my family, and so the candy bars were like, oh God, that you might as well have been kind of like feeding me a piece of tar. I wanted
Yeah.
like good quality, even if I just had a square. That was what I wanted to nourish myself with, because it was a mindful shift in loving myself better.
I love it. And I feel like there is no smooth segue to the third segment of your talk. So, and I want to make time for it. So, let's talk about pooping.
So pooping is my favorite thing to talk about.
I love it. Somebody else has never said that on the podcast, and I don't know. Anyway,
Mm,
so let's talk about it
I
and why it's your favorite.
I love it because you know, and I intentionally use the word poop because why do we have to take things so seriously, right? Like, why can't we just
Yes, let's infuse it with some joy.
why can't we use the word poop? Yeah, and so poop is just so fundamental because it's just so hard to invite love and joy and creativity and authenticity and all of those sort of beautiful emotions that are worth cultivating if you are storing crap in your body.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Hmm.
If we are not pooping on a daily basis as women, we are storing endocrine disruptors. We are storing and recycling estrogen. We are building up cholesterol that we don't need. We are literally creating a toxic environment in our body that sabotages us from getting the clarity that we need to really focus on what's important and pursue our goals with vigor. That is just reality. We need to poop on a daily basis.
And so, what problems do you see in your practice? Like, so I know where we can't touch on, what's going on for everybody, but, if there's somebody listening and they fall into sort of the majority or the average person, like, what are some of the problems? And again, I know this is very like blanket statements and people will give them all the information so they can reach out to you directly. So for some very personal counseling, but what do you see in your practice and what are some general places to start to work through these problems?
That's a great question. Our gut health basically has and plays a role in basically everything our body does. It houses 90% of our serotonin production. So literally, our gut controls how happy we feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are not able to detoxify properly on a daily basis, that has a direct impact on your mental health, anxiety, rumination, anything really that's tied to kind of mood and behavior. I mean, even if you just think about like how literally, if you need to go to the toilet or if you haven't been to the toilet for 3 days, how uncomfortable that feels and how that puts you in such a bad mood as a result. And then when you do evacuate and that feeling of satisfaction, right? There's nothing
Yeah.
like it. I mean, there is a direct connection and a direct impact on your mood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. People who have trouble detoxifying, and by the way, like people think that just because they poop on a daily basis that they're regular and that they poop well. That is not the case. And as we age, unfortunately, age together with stress takes a toll on our digestive system. And so we become less efficient at trapping toxicity and pooping it out, right? So even if you're pooing on a daily basis, you might not be pooing enough. You might not be, you may not be able to trap those toxins because you're not taking in the fiber you need to trap them and expel them out of the body. So in terms of symptoms that I see, people who have immunity issues. So, if you're getting sick with a cold on a regular basis and that cold is turning into bronchitis or sinusitis on a regular basis and you're needing to take antibiotics for it. People who get cold sores on a regular basis, anything really immunity related is tied to the gut. Even autoimmune conditions are tied to the gut. So if you're a person who's experiencing an autoimmune condition or, immunity symptoms, anxiety, mental health issues, that is tied to the gut. And, the other thing that I see in women, particularly as they enter perimenopause, is what we call estrogen dominance symptoms. So, heavy periods, inability to sleep properly, painful breasts, vaginal dryness is a big, symptom of perimenopause. But during this time when our body is making these significant hormonal shifts and we're losing progesterone, that can put us in a state of estrogen dominance. And estrogen is one of these amazing hormones that is a little Goldilocks. So it needs to be just right, and we need to be able to use it and lose it. And the way we lose it is through our poop. So we have to be able to detoxify it properly. And again, that comes back to detoxifying on a daily basis and making sure that that poop is high quality.
So how do we have an intentional poo?
So that starts with the fuel that you're taking in. It starts with your nourishment. So making sure that, you're eating foods that are rich in fiber. And that means having, 2 to 3 cups of vegetables per meal. And fruits too, of course, but fruits on not 2 to 3 cups of vegetables or of fruits a day.
Yeah.
that's probably too much. But that means, making sure that your diet is rich in healthy fats like nuts and seeds and good quality oils and avocados and, good, nice, healthy fats that are going to keep your digestive tract supple, your nervous system supple, and your hormones nice and regulated. It means basically eating maybe magnesium rich foods as well. Again, like avocados and leafy greens and things like that. And maybe it means taking a little bit of a fiber supplement, maybe some flax meal or some chia seeds, putting those into your smoothies or into your meals. I even put chia seeds in my burgers.
I love it.
For example, I
sneak
them in whenever I can, to add in that extra fiber that's going to help trap those toxins that you don't need so that you can poop them out.
It's just, it's incredible. I just feel like I could talk to you for hours. And I'm sure anybody listening, like, you've given an incredible amount of inspiration. But yeah, for anybody who, wants to fine tune their diet, has maybe you've even brought an awareness to something that somebody didn't even realize was deficient. We're going to put all of I know you do one-on-one coaching, group coaching. You have so many amazing resources available. We're going to share all of those. I personally want to thank you because I just think this is such an interesting and another way of looking at how we can be so intentional and mindful in everything we do and how it's so interconnected. So I just want to ask you, in closing, is there something that we missed? So if we missed something, well, we'll either get you back on again or you can add it here. Or if you want to leave, with some, or both, leave people just with some words of inspiration and encouragement.
Gosh, there's so many things I could say, but I think the one thing that's resonating with me at the moment is this actually. We don't believe what we don't practice. And that's something that is top of mind these days. And maybe it's because I'm kind of adding content to my group coaching and I'm dedicating a lot of time to think about the mindfulness piece about how we eat and how we can integrate it into our daily life. But one of the things that we hear a lot as women is that we are enough, right? That belief of like, no matter what, we are enough. We are worthy. We are born worthy and born worthy of love and acceptance and just born with a light, a special light that we all need to share with the world. And the thing is that in the past, whenever I heard that, I never really quite believed it.
Yeah.
I wanted to, but there was always something holding me back from believing it 100%. And when I looked at my life, I realized that the reason I didn't believe it is because I didn't practice it on a daily basis. And so I suppose if I can leave your listeners with a word of advice, is take a look at your life and practice worthiness in your intentions. One of the things that I love about nutrition is that it's something we can control. We can control what we put into our body. And there's a real intentionality behind that. Even if your intentions sometimes are not maybe in line with like 100% healthy decisions, there's still an intention behind it. And so bringing that intention into your awareness and rewarding yourself for eating in a way that elevates your worthiness and helps you manifest it is really the key, I think, for me to really just living a life worth living, because it just cascades into so many other areas of your life.
That was very, very beautifully said, and such an important message. And Cristina, I just want to thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and for holding space for me and for the beautiful joy you bring into the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. May some of the wisdom shared here inspire your most intentional living. For more information about this episode, this podcast, intentional living, and my work in the world, please visit mayyouknowjoy.com. You can also find my May You Know Joy and Seeds of Intention cards there, and my book, Intentional Days. You'll also find details for the Intentional Days membership, where you can gain access to a thriving community of intentional souls and lots of regular inspiration. I've got you covered. Until next time, I wish you great joy and many intentional days.